Okay, good evening, everyone. We're going to call the meeting to order, and we will start with the land acknowledgement statement. We acknowledge that the ground on which we live is the traditional territory of Caldwell First Nation, of the Three Fires Confederacy, and the original people of Point Pelee and Pelee Island and its surrounding lands and waters, and that of the Huron-Wendat and Wyandot peoples. We recognize and respect the First Nations who are stewards of the land and waters of Turtle Island and who have embraced this stewardship since time immemorial. We would also like to acknowledge the contributions of other nearby First Nation communities and all original people across Turtle Island. We will now have a moment of silent reflection, followed by the playing of our national anthem. Okay, if we can get an adoption of the agenda for August 8th, 2023, as it be adopted as presented. Councillor Reno, support. Councillor Desjardins, all in favor? That carries. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Deputy Mayor?
Your Worship, on item number 2, the alley program review, the alley behind my house is going through an uncontested closing. Therefore, I will declare a conflict of interest on reviewing the program.
Thank you. Councillor Burns.
Your Worship, I have a conflict with item 1. I do have a vehicle that is unplated in my yard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any others? Okay. Can we get an adoption of minutes for the regular meeting of council held July 25th, 2023, and that it be adopted as presented?
So moved.
Moved Councillor Burns, support Councillor Riccio-Spagnolo. All in favor? That carries as well. Mayor's comments. Congratulations to administration again on another successful night market. We were very fortunate that the weather was nice for us to be able to hold it here at the Civic Center again. So congratulations. It's always well attended. I think people really look forward to them. We have 2 more, right? The end of August and the end of September still. We also have the last call before fall coming, which the tickets are now on sale. They're $20 per night on September 8th and 9th at the event center. So you would buy for each night if you were to attend. Tickets are limited, so order your tickets online today or visit our website for more details on that event. Our tax date reminder, it's the second installment of the final property tax payment is due on Friday. Well, this says February 25th, so that doesn't seem accurate to me. But that, I guess, is coming due August, it's August 25th, that one's due? Okay, so August 25th. And if you have any further questions, you can contact the Finance Department for that. And our fall program registration, priority registration for fall program begins on Monday, August 14th. A $5 non-refundable fee applies to each program. Regular registration begins on Monday, August 21st. You can register for swimming lessons, fitness and aquatic classics, and community programs. And I know there's many other events that have happened in the community the last few weeks, but I think that may take too long, so we will just move on with the agenda. So we have no public meetings in our hearings, no presentations or delegations. We will move right into our staff reports with item number 1, which is the vehicular parking and clean yard bylaws, and I will turn it over to Mr. Burgess.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm before you this evening to bring forward my report with regards to the updates and amendments to the vehicular bylaw, or vehicular parking bylaw, and the clean yard bylaw. Staff have worked together to provide what I hope to be is a clear and concise chart of all the proposed changes as council requested. In addition to that chart, we've also included both bylaws in a draft form for council's consideration and approval at a later date should they choose to. The amendments before you in both these documents were made in an effort to improve enforcement, provide clear language, and to meet all changes for format for AODA compliance purposes. And I am available for any questions should council have any.
Thank you very much. Council, questions? Councilor Reno?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Alan. Alan, I noticed that we have eliminated the language of the 8-inch rule for grass, and we're now leaving it to the discretion of the officer. Am I reading that correctly, or is that 8 inches still in there and I just missed it?
No, 8 inches is still in their section 2.4 of the property maintenance section of the bylaw. Still states that the grass can be no more than 8 inches.
Okay, I'm sorry for that, that mix-up. My other question is in regards to the parking bylaw. Thank you for bringing forward the electrical vehicle issues as those questions have come up, and I just haven't been able to give any definitive answer. So thank you for adding that to the bylaw. My question goes a little bit more towards the small commercial vehicle provision. I'm just wondering if I'm reading this correctly, and correct me if I am wrong, if your neighbor has a commercial trailer, has a business and has a trailer, it can only be parked in front of a property that they own, and it's not to be parked next to a neighbor's house or anything. Am I reading that correctly? I'm looking at the page that talks about no person shall, number 19, no person shall permit to be parked any commercial vehicle on any street in front of any lot where parking is permitted, except for the commercial vehicle is operated by the owner or occupant of the dwelling unit. Am I reading that correctly? If anybody was to ask me if a commercial vehicle that's not doing a commercial job at that time can be parked in front of their home, am I reading that correctly? That would be the second page, second bullet point in.
I'm just rereading it myself.
Sure.
Shall parking. So section 8, so just to kind of back up a little bit. So section 18 primarily speaks to the vehicle being parked on the street where a vehicle is permitted to park unless the small vehicle is, so you are allowed to park it on the street. The vehicle is either owned or operated by the occupant of the dwelling. No person shall park a vehicle that is advertising or displaying a vehicle. There's no plates. So 19 is actually with regards to derelict vehicles. So you're referring to section 18. I believe there's still a provision, and I do apologize for not having it exactly with me, that did allow an individual to still park it on their property as well. I can get back to you on that. Before we adopt the bylaw, I can come back to you with clarity on that.
Okay, so in particular, the proposed regulation 18,
Yep.
and 1 and 2, that's what I'm looking for clarification on. Thank you.
Very good.
Did you want to add to it? Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor, I believe actually there is that provision that Alan is talking about in section 24, where we do allow for small commercial vehicles to be located on a driveway that has been constructed on the property or within the garage in the property. So there is some allowances to have on your personal property as well as in front of your dwelling, if that helps.
So, so it would be allowed, so if a person had a small trailer for their business, it would be allowed to be on their driveway or in front of their home on the street, but not in front of anyone else's home without their permission. Is that, am I reading that correctly?
That is the intention, correct?
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, Alan, I'm looking just for some better clarification on section 23 about no person shall park a derelict vehicle on a driveway and/or a vehicle with no plates or a vehicle with expired plates.
In particular, what would you like to know?
Just again, so for me, my old life, I get no plates on the highway. I understand expired plates expired tags on the highway. And as a classic car guy, wanting to abide the best I can, when I work on my Barracuda, I push it out, I push it in, and tore my Achilles, and my wife was not very impressed with me. So again, I understand the behind it, but some folks have asked me about that. People who are working on classic cars that are not yet mobile, that by default would be an offense under the Highway Traffic Act to hang plates on them, to be misuse of plates. The vehicles are insured because you can get classic car insurance while you're working on them. And if they left it out on their driveway, covered with the tarp because your $10,000 Dodge Charger with no engine, you don't want it to get rusty. Are we looking at that, or I just wanted some clarification because a number of folks that are working on classic cars asked me that specific question.
Thank you for the question. The intent and in speaking with staff when it came to derelict vehicles and or not so much derelict vehicles, but vehicles as you described for like classic cars and whatnot, the intent is that the individual would have to roll that vehicle back into their garage or store it back in a permanent storage building. The difficulty that we run into is that individuals unfortunately will store not so much the derelict vehicle, but will store other vehicles without plates on their driveways, and they tend to remain there for long periods of time, therefore causing an eyesore or an issue for the neighbors. So we were trying to balance how can we still allow an individual to still work on a vehicle and keep that vehicle and keep that secondary vehicle on their property. And that's where we'd come back to the point of, provided that they place that vehicle back in storage within their garage or within an accessory building on their property, that would ensure that the intent of the bylaw would be protected and to the best degree possible, allow that individual to still have that vehicle, yet still allow the neighbors to enjoy the view lines that they currently enjoy.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other questions or comments? I just have a few. Item 2.5, when it comes to noxious weeds, I understand we've removed it because there's a Weed Control Act. Are we still in charge of enforcing it, though?
So the Noxious Weeds Act is actually not part of bylaw enforcement. It's actually part of through the roads department. We'll still deal with weeds. So if the weeds are in excess of the proper height, then we will deal with them as weeds. We won't deal with them necessarily as noxious weeds. Our staff don't have the necessary training or to be able to observe what an actual noxious weed is. In the past, we've had to bring in staff to try to help us with that, but it does become an issue for our staff. So we will just deal with them as weeds, and then we would ask them to be removed in the same manner.
So what happens if they are noxious weeds then?
Again, if we would ask that the owner still remove them, and if they are found to be noxious, then we'd have to find the correct manner in which they have to be destroyed. So in that case, we would speak with other staff on board and or invited other professionals to help us with the actual destruction of that particular weed under the act. But it wouldn't be necessarily as part of our of our weed control bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Beggs.
Just to add to Mr. Burgess's comments, so the noxious weeds are regulated and controlled under the Noxious Weeds Act. And so any enforcement that we do is regulated under that legislation. If I'm not mistaken, we rely on Public Works to assist us through the roads department. And I believe Mr. Beggs is our appointed weed inspector. So he helps us to identify weeds under that legislation. So if for your example, if a resident has a concern about a noxious weed, then bylaw enforcement together with representatives from the Public Works Department will go out and do an appropriate inspection to identify it as a noxious weed and to make provisions for its removal if that's necessary.
Thank you very much. The next one I had question on was 2.9, which was the pools. And I see we have the addition of a pool open date, which I think is great. This was probably the first year I heard complaints from members of the community that we didn't have a date in place. My question is, I see it's June 15th, and if they choose not to open it, then they've got to treat or remove the water. Is June 15th something you would see in other municipalities? Because I mean, most people rush to open their pools, so is that a reasonable date?
In discussing it with staff, it was about the most reasonable date that we could come up with. Like you said, there's a lot of people who rush to open their pools, and there's other people who delay and delay and delay, or they, maybe they may have some kind of a medical condition or issue for why they can't open. And that's why we chose to set a date, a solid date, but then allow there still to be the option they can still have water on their pool cover, but as long as they're treating it and that it doesn't become a source for mosquito larvae and whatnot, that the water could still remain actually on the cover, and they don't necessarily have to open it up that season. So that was the purpose of that additional language, along with the opening date.
Perfect. And then my last one that I had was 4.3, which was grass clippings or other debris from your yard. It doesn't speak about debris put onto the roadway necessarily. Is that because that's already part of the, I think, Highway Traffic Act would have something, but I've noticed that more and more people are cutting the grasses and blowing it right onto the road and leaving it on the road, which we all know is dangerous. Does that have to be clarified in there, or is that not something we can enforce?
So the purpose of 4.3 was that no person shall blow clippings or weeds or snow onto the road. So you not to blow it onto adjoining properties and or unauthorized properties, and not to blow it onto the sidewalk or onto the road. So it was to try to help so that it was clear for the public that that's something that they can't do.
Perfect. I don't have any other questions, members of council. So there's a recommendation in front of everybody that the report of the Supervisor of Planning Development Services dated July 6, 2023, regarding the proposed amendments to the Town of LaSalle's Clean Yard Bylaw and Vehicular Parking Bylaw be received, and that the draft bylaws, being a bylaw respecting the maintenance of property and a bylaw to regulate vehicular parking within the limits of the Town of LaSalle, be adopted at a future meeting of council. Deputy Mayor? And support, Councillor Renaud. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you very much. Switching? Okay. Item 2, we have the ALI program review, and I will hand this over, I think, to Ms. Beggs first. Or Mr. Galt? Okay.
Yep. Through your worship, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Me and myself and Ms. Beggs have co-authored this report before you tonight to kind of give you a recap and summary of the ALI program to date. I was involved with this since its inception in 2019, where we came before you, and just to kind of give a status of what's been accomplished, what still remains, what challenges exist, and basically leave it up to you to if we wish to continue running the program or if it is time to suspend the program. So those will be the two options that we get to at the end. But first, I would like to step into what the current process is, just kind of give a high-level recap without going too deep into the history of how it came to be, but basically what we do now. So any process begins with an application that comes in from a member of the public, one of the landowners that wish to acquire a piece of property at the rear of their lot. At that point, currently we have a wait list, but once their alley comes up, we have to retain a surveyor to go into the alley to mark what structures may be in there. And I know that we have had a couple that have come before council where structures were the kind of main talking point, whether they be fences, pools, sheds. I think there's been ones with a gate that may be a fence, and you may remember those various ones. So that's what the surveyor does, goes out, does that. They come back with a sketch that tells staff where these things are located, and then from there, staff meets up to discuss how it should be distributed while acknowledging these existing structures. So that is where the staff takes over, and we come up with a plan, send out the offers to residents as in terms of what we believe is a fair distribution, have to receive their input and whether they are interested or not. And if there are no issues, everything runs smoothly, great. We can register a reference plan, and it comes down to legal, and I can do the transfers, and the alley is taken care of. More often than not, there are some sort of disputes with residents, and this requires staff to, usually through phone calls or emails, go back and forth to kind of negotiate and mitigate the issues and hopefully come to a resolution, at which point it goes to the reference plan and back to me. The worst case scenario is that we can't get anyone to agree and we end up before you, and that's happened rare times, I think 3 times total in the 4 years it's been running. But either way, they all end up at the same end game of reference plan gets registered and we can do some transfers. Good, next slide, please. So what we have on the screen now is the ideal alley where people's structures are on their own respective halves. And we can say those 3 property owners on the north, they each get their own, and then the ones on the south, it looks about even there. So we don't typically see this, but that is the ideal world where we can do the transfers. This is, in this instance here, it's a 6-part alley. The more parts that we have to add, and then the larger the alley, then the greater the cost usually in terms of the reference plan and how much time the surveyors have to spend out there to mark down structures. So that's where we see some cost hits. In the event, let's look at, say, the westernmost alley portion there with the blue and the red on the west side. Let's say the owner to the north had encumbered the whole thing, then the blue portion, the top half, would be offered to them at the alley rate of $200 or the new rate of $350, and then the remainder, the red part, would be offered at fair market value. So that was a recent 2021 direction of council where we made that change to acknowledge those situations where owners have gone beyond the midway point, and how do we appropriately deal with them to ensure that there is some fairness rather than just giving them the alley that they've otherwise encumbered illegally. So that's kind of the background of what we look at for distribution. Yeah, absolutely.
So just to highlight, or I guess piggyback on what Mr. Dalt is highlighting as part of this graphic, we thought this would be a good graphic to show to council. Generally, we see a range of different alley types. No 2 alleys are the same. Typically, we see medium-sized alleys. So later on in the presentation, you'll see how we've categorized it into small alleys, medium-sized alleys, and larger alleys. And the larger the alley, the more complicated it has the potential to become. So small alleys are typically anywhere between the transference of 4 to 6 parts. Medium-sized alleys, we typically transfer around 5 to 10 parts, and then larger sized alleys we would transfer in excess of often 13 parts. So, the larger the alley, the larger the alley block, the more transfers, and oftentimes the more complex the file becomes.
Thank you for that, and I can certainly echo that, because obviously when you have more landowners and more voices involved, the more back and forth that is required to kind of get it to its end point. So on the next slide here, in terms of some additional information for you to consider, I just touched on it that we increased the fee from the original $200 per landowner to $350 a couple of years ago. What we did there, though, we have grandfathered in the ones that were in the queue at the time to keep them at $200. So we're still finishing up the ones that were the $200 ones. We're almost at the end, at which point we'll be starting to get $350 per transfer. So there'll be some additional revenue coming in that will help offset some of the increased costs from reference plans. And I touched also on the fair market value if a landowner has gone beyond their midway point. Another point that has come up is this program doesn't apply to certain zones that are from the official plan, including the town center, mixed use. Those have come up at various points where we will charge fair market value or find a proper rate, either through an appraisal process or we're just using recent appraisals. We've done both to success. And the last point there is with respect to what we call expedited alleys. And those are ones where, let's say somebody needs that portion, it could be for a building permit purpose to have a increased rear yard setback, could be for a pool going in this summer. They need that alley, they need to get it today. We say, okay, we can process that, we can expedite it, but it will be at a full cost recovery. So reference plan, you pay for. The land, we have the fair market value, you will pay for. Even legal fees for registration costs and some staff time, we have a legal fee in the user fee bylaw that covers this. So the town is out no money on those ones, and we've done roughly 25 of those in the last 4 years as well, where individual owners have come up, and we just process those as quickly as we can at their expense. And so this is, I'm not going to go over every single figure and number on there. Again, as Ms. Beggs mentioned earlier, we have the 3 different designations size-wise in terms of the alleys. There's been a handful of the small ones. We've seen a good number of the large alleys, and then medium, there's been a handful more. So that's usually where we come in at. And then I would draw your attention to the final 2 lines there, where we have the numbers bolded. So the second lowest line is what it costs, basically what it costs the town for each transfer. So when I click the button and the property goes into a resident's name on those various alleys, that is what we are effectively out. And then if we extrapolate that over a whole alley, that's the final line there. So as you see, a 4-part alley, what that costs in the first column there, about $3,500. A 10-part alley, $7,100 per transfer. And then the larger alleys is just a little bit north of $7,000. And these numbers are the average from all 4 years. And what I can say just from observing this, the costs are going up on the reference plan side of things. So those numbers, while they're averaged, like if it was on a graph, it would be trending upwards in terms of those costs.
Just to add to that, I go back to a question that Councillor Burns asked us during the orientation session earlier this year to suggest, Councillor Burns, you asked the question, what does an alley cost the municipality per alley disposal, per block? So hopefully this chart tries to provide that explanation. So on a per alley block disposal, if we're dealing with a smaller alley, which is 2 to 6 parts, and assuming it's a 4-part alley, it will cost the municipality $3,500. If we're dealing with a medium-sized alley, which we're assuming is a 10-part alley, it costs the municipality on average $7,100. And then if we're dealing with a larger alley, it comes at a cost of $7,300 to the municipality, assuming a 13-part alley. So that subtracts the revenue that we get per transfer from the individual.
Okay, so now in terms of the success, if you want to call it that, of the program, We've done 23 blocks of alleys over the last 4 years, and that has been about 200, almost 200 individual transfers to various landowners throughout the municipality. 3 of these have come before you for review purposes. Those are the ones that we couldn't settle ahead of time, and had to come to council for decision. And like I said earlier, or I alluded to, there's been maybe 1 or 2 of our ideal alleys where everyone got along, no one contested anything, off we go. The vast majority involves some negotiations or some at least explanations that staff has provided that gets the appropriate buy-in from the residents. So we've seen success in that regard. And as I also mentioned earlier, we've had 25 of the expedited alleys. So those are moving along, and those usually don't have any negative impacts in terms of disputes or neighbor issues. If they are, again, we've worked through those and get them done. And one of the final points that I wanted to highlight was that the majority of landowners that we reach out to are immediately interested in the program, and they wish to participate, and if anything, they say, oh, can we actually, if anyone else doesn't want theirs, can I get a piece of their portion as well? So if nothing else, there is a lot of buy-in and positivity from the public, even just from hearing that from staff that deal with the individuals that call in. They support the program existing, and I can say there is about 30 more alley requests currently in the queue as we sit here today. So there's about 75 left in the whole town to do. 30 of them are already waiting for us to get to at some future time. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Or is that already there? Okay. Sorry, just lost my spot here. Okay, so some of the challenges. So I've talked about some of the successes. So the challenges is staff time is the main one. I mean, we have time. We're planning staff. Myself, we will sit down. We'll go over the proposed distribution in a way that we hope is as fair as possible. That also follows the intent of the policy. We'll also include engineering. I know Jonathan and Mark are both here tonight. Mike, not Mark. Mark's over there. We'll ask them about if any easements are required, if there's any sanitary sewer, say, in the rear yard that we have to address and make sure that we capture. So there's staff time there to reach out to residents, to receive their responses. We have everything tracked. We created a system a few years ago in terms of how anyone else can go in there, have a look to see who said what, when, and that way we're all on the same page. Legal-wise, we have to prepare all of the deeds and the transfers and have people come in to sign, pay, all that fun stuff. So between that and the mediations where we're trying to get residents to agree with each other, that's where some staff time is spent. Another challenge is the cost of surveys have gone up. So I know the average, say for those large ones, was $7,000. Recently, those, between the work it takes to get all the structures for those larger ones, say we've had some that are 20 parts. Those come in north of $15,000 by the end of it. So when I say the costs are going up, they're going up significantly. That $7,000 is not going to be a large alley, I don't think, going forward. Those are probably skewed from some of the older data. And lastly, one of the challenges that isn't necessarily as a part of the program, it's almost what the program is trying to help deal with, is the tree maintenance on they're municipally owned alleys. So the trees that are on there are our trees. So we've been getting an increased number of requests through Public Works that, oh, this tree, it looks like it's dying, or there's dead branches, and there's some issues that have been described with trees in the alleys, and that's where some of the liability comes in as well, that we were trying to take care of with this program. If a tree falls onto a shed, a pool, a house, you know, that's not going to be beneficial for the town's bottom line. So, and again, the cost of the maintenance of trees and have arborists come out, it's only getting higher and higher. So that number will get bigger going forward as these requests become more the norm. If you want to go to the next slide, we can show. So this is a recent example of one where we received a request in the last couple of weeks. Jonathan, yeah, last couple of weeks, there was a very large tree that a resident has had issues with, and it's on our land, and he's suggested that it needs to be cut, so we've already contacted an arborist to come and look at it, or have a company give us a quote to what it would cost to do this. Now, it's so large and where it's located, because we don't actually have access, because this alley is encumbered all the way down, we would have to get a crane involved, and it would be a very large project. I think this one, the quote came in north of $25,000 for one tree removal, if that's where we have to end up. So again, if we get 2 of those requests a year, we're approaching our budget for the alley program already. So that is just one of the real examples that we've had in the last little bit. And again, these requests are growing more and more frequent. Did you want to add anything on that one?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the slide there, the air photo shows the property there. It backs onto this tree that we're discussing, and we highlighted the encumbrances, the current encumbrances in those yellow boxes. So it's just interesting to see, you know, the different property owners and how they're, you know, they're encumbering their alley that potentially they don't own. And how those encumbrances preclude us from being able to access our own property. So, you know, one of the benefits of the program is to dispose of those alleys and reduce the, you know, the amount or these instances from occurring in the future. So that is one objective of the program, to reduce these types of instances.
Thank you. And the final slide here, I get to the 2 options that are before each of you to decide on tonight. So the first one is that we maintain the current program in its current state. Again, from an administration standpoint, I believe we have classified it as a success. Residents have bought into it. We have a good completion rate, and we are usually on or right near budget. So we're doing well from that end of things. As I said earlier, there's about 75 alleys left. So with the current budget, if the costs remain fairly static as in terms of what I have presented here tonight, we're looking about 10, 15 years before we're through the whole thing. And the benefits of this is that we reduce these potential maintenance costs with the trees, as well as municipal liability. So that is how I'm looking at this in terms of what we're able to do and where we currently sit with the program. The second option would be to terminate the program, and we go back to the full cost recovery model. Case-by-case basis, an applicant comes in, and we just do one alley at a time. We'll end up with landlocked pieces that way. Obviously, when we're closing off bits and pieces of an alley here and there. The benefit, of course, full cost recovery, nothing out of the budget, so we reduce that line item back down to 0. Less staff time would be required, and but the liability costs would remain. There would still be staff time to handle those expedited requests, and the maintenance costs could remain. So those are the 2 options before you. Myself and Ms. Beggs are available for any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of council? Councilor Reno?
Thank you, Your Worship. My only question goes back to the fair market value of the properties. In our old way of doing things, we had $1 and $1.50 set forward for whether or not there was an easement on the alley. And then we ran into that problem when we had someone come before us and we had to evaluate that alley, and there was some discussion around that. Have we now come up with a way of valuing that property that we can explain to somebody in a clear and easy way, or does this have to be evaluated by a third party?
No, I appreciate that question, and the short answer is, so the value that we are using now, and this came together through a few appraisals that we've had done now, is that a rear yard alley is $4.50 per square foot, and if there's an easement, $3. So it's the same ratio as the 150 to 1. Now it's 450 and 3, and that is in line with appraisals that we have had done. I think it's something that, as we have sales of just even lots, or if we're aware of any sales that take place throughout the municipality as the years continue, I think it's something that we would just keep an eye on and we evaluate that way. And in talking with staff as well, we've kind of agreed that seems to be a fair way to go about it. So it's a number derived through appraisal process, not necessarily alley specific. I think one was, but using what we have for various development deals in different areas, we can pull appraisals from various sources. So we came to $450 for non-encumbered and with no easements, and $3 with easements.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think that's more than fair. I mean, considering when we started using the $1 and $1.50, I think a standard lot in LaSalle was going for around 50 grand. So I don't think that your raise is unreasonable, and I don't think that it's cheating anybody, our side or theirs. Thank you.
Mr. Moshe?
Just as a follow-up to the question, if I understand it correctly, the alley program does not contemplate a land charge. So I think what the fee or the rate that Mr. Dadalta is referring to is in a situation where maybe a development situation or something of that nature. If someone is just coming in to look at an alley behind their home, it's a flat rate and it has no relationship to the per square foot charge. And just turning to Mr. Dadalta to ensure that I've got that correct. I just don't want you to go away with the wrong impression.
No, just so I can clarify my side, if someone comes in and they have an encumbered alley and they have to buy it the old way, they're now going to be charged $3 and $4.50 if they have encumbered that alley and they end up buying more. Am I correct?
Yeah, so if it's expedited, yes, and then also that number comes into play for those people that go beyond the midway point, for the portion that's past the halfway point. So hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, I do understand that we're looking strictly at the $3.50 for your regular new cookie cutter that we've been doing for the last 4 years. Thank you.
Councillor Burns?
Okay, what does it cost us, regular alley, no encumbrances? How much is it cost the town of LaSalle to sell that alley net? We're not full recovery, so what is the difference? So the back alley is 7 feet, half the alley, or 7.5 by 60. Because you have the reference plans here on the alleys and when it says 2 to 4, but I'm just looking for one person.
For one, okay, so for one individual, I'm just
I
going
mean, I understand the 6, anywhere with, if you have 6, then it's going to be $860, give or take a penny. And how much does the taxpayer pay us? If
So-
if these figures are right.
Yes, I'm confident in the numbers there.
Yeah.
In terms of, so let's just look at the middle column there, a medium alley, that's our most standard one. So the second last line there, after we take in the revenue of $200, it would cost the town $716.06 per transfer for each individual.
So the actual cost is $916.20, and we're subsidizing $716.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question. I'm not for subsidizing anyone, period. I think that the cost of the alley, the way it was before, even at $1.50, was the total cost was bared by the applicant. And I think that that's what we should get back to. Because if we're closing 25 a year, let's use $1,000, we're losing $25,000. And why should the rest of the taxpayers, including myself, I'll just use your name as an example, to subsidize you? I mean, it's not fair. So I would like to see the user pay. What we get for the alley is minimal, but it's the legal, it's which the Ontario government downloaded to us, the new deed, where in the old days we used to just add it and it was kind of register ourselves, but now all those extra costs, I mean, I personally would prefer that. I don't know about the rest of council, but that's my opinion, and I will make a motion at a later date. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Answer your question. I agree with Mr. Burns in one concept where I think that, most residents should be responsible for their own parcel that they're looking to purchase, and we shouldn't be subsidizing others. However, when we have this one instance that we're currently looking at where there's one tree on our property that's $25,000 to remove, at what point are we actually going to be subsidizing when it comes to insurance claims and other items? So it's a really hard one to kind of decide what is best for the municipality. The actual part that I'm kind of leaning towards is more the staff time that's required currently with this program, knowing how busy this department currently is. Maybe it makes sense for us to go back to the original, which is they pay for it. We only handle 3 to 5 a year. It's going to take us longer to get through them. However, that frees up staff time to deal with many, many other issues currently going on in the town of LaSalle. So I agree with Mr. Burns in that aspect that, you know, it might be time just to go back to the original. However, with 35 applications currently in the queue, what happens to those 35? Do they get to stick with the program that was in place like we did with the other ones who had the 200? How do we handle that?
Your worship, I would say what's in the queue stays at the current policy going forward. We look for full cost recovery. These alleys are municipally owned alleys that are ours. You can use them. You can do what we've done in the past. Just assume them. Be even so bold as to assume your neighbor's half of the alley. But you have no right to put anything on those alleys. You cannot put a pool on it, can't put a shed on it. It's all stipulated, unless I'm wrong, under the law. And if we have an easement, you can't do anything with the alley. Who knows who planted this tree? It's that big. It's probably 60, 70 years ago. I mean, I know just in the old part of LaSalle, the corner post of the old houses, that where the stake was, the steel pin that went in the ground, that's where they planted the trees. And that's why you'll see them every 60 feet. But then they grow out into our municipality and who owns them. But I think going forward, we know where the issues are. I think we need to put people on notice, either remove them or buy the alley. I mean, I'm not going to buy an alley if you don't tell me. There's no advantage. You have used it for 40 years. So, I mean, we either get, there's only one way to clean it up. You can even send out whoever they are. Going forward, this is the cost today to you. The future costs will be these if you don't act by a certain date. And other than that, I think it's time for bylaws to enforce and secure our property. Because why now should we be paying 40 years later and we don't know whose tree it is, $25,000 just because we own the property? I mean, I know the law's the law and that's what we have to follow. I agree with that. But on the other side, what happens if somebody gets killed in the meantime on that property? What will the lawsuit be then? So it's time to either cut bait and do the right thing for both the town and the taxpayers that are not affected by this. And with that, I'm going to make a motion that what's in the queue can be remained. If we want to give a period, and I would give a period of time of 60 days for those that we know at the current rate, but going forward, it's full cost recovery. Thank you.
Ms. Beggs.
Through you, Madam Mayor, just so council has the benefit of all the information, we currently have 30 applications in the queue. If we do 5 valleys a year, that's 6 more years of administration of the program, just so you have all the details.
Just to follow up, that's what I would like to eliminate.
I don't think there is a way of eliminating it with the current budget and the current staff time that's required to be able to do the program. That's why it is as long as it is. Our budget is 68,000?
68 per year, so 30 alleys, say they're medium, 7,000 per alley. That's, I'm not good at math, but
Yes. No, but
we're well north of 68,000 by that point, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's the problem that we're currently facing with the program as is or changed. Mr. Militia?
I think, excuse me, I think the questions that council are asking are quite valid. And we struggle with the program as well in terms of trying to find that balance. I think originally when the program was proposed to council, there were a few challenges that we were having at the time. One was that, again, quite frankly, we don't actively maintain the alleys. And so as part of that, things grow in the alleys, and they become our responsibility because we've not maintained them. Equally, folks do maintain the alleys, and they take a quasi-ownership of the alley in terms of what they believe they are entitled to, not that they physically own the alley. And they will put items, structures in the alley, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. And at times, the challenges of the day were such that, the structure that was in the alley might have been 3 or 4 owners ago, and the current owner wasn't even aware that there was an alley up in the back. And so there was a number of challenges as we went through there, and I think probably about 8 or 10 years ago, one of the most significant alley pieces came forward, and the municipality at the time decided that in order to alleviate the responsibility and to allow for existing structures that were in the alley, whether they were appropriately there or inappropriately there, allow those to continue there and to, as Mr. DeDalt and Ms. Beggs have identified in the graphs and the diagrams, to meander the alley so that it may not be a straight line. It may zigzag up and down in a bit of that sawtooth situation. So the purpose of the program was to effectively, and we knew this at the time when we started this program, I think at the time, correct me, Mr. Dult, but I think that we thought that was going to be about a 12 or 13 year time frame by the time we got through all the alleys in town. But the cost, the budget has remained the same, the costs have gone up, and so it'll take us longer. It's going to take us probably closer to 13 or 15 years if we maintain the existing policy. So again, the whole idea was the whole purpose was to put an incentive for homeowners to purchase at a very nominal rate the property behind their home that was in the alley, and therefore take the responsibility of that piece of property, and so it would then advocate us of that responsibility. That was the whole purpose of the program. Now, again, points are valid in terms of subsidization and things of that nature. Again, those are true today, and they were true when we established the policy some 8 or 10 years ago. By and large, the current program, as it's set out, by and large works effectively, and those that come to council are few and far between. They tend to be a little bit more active and more, there's a lot of discussion when they come to council. However, those ones are few and far between. Mr. DeDalt, Ms. Beggs, and their teams seem to manage the process quite well, and most of that discussion happens behind the scenes, and we take care of that, and then it's just the property transfer that happens at council. So I think from that perspective, with the exception of subsidization, the program's working quite well. I think the issue that is being brought up is the subsidization model. And again, we knew that going in. If council chooses to change that model today, we're certainly able to do that, but realize we've probably got 6 or 7 years worth of activity in the queue before that kind of dies off. If council chooses that direction, when that dies off, we'll be back to where we started, in that we will still be responsible for things that are in the alley. And we will become involved when a property owner wants to purchase the alley behind their home, only to discover that their neighbor has put a structure in what they deem to be their portion of the alley. And so we will need, that is our property, we will need to get involved and have those structures removed or come to some sort of mediated settlement with that. And that was, again, going back to why the program's in place today, that was one of the main drivers of the program, is that we did not want to have to go in there and have homeowners remove a structure that potentially could have been there for 30 or 40 years in some cases. So that's a bit of a stroll down memory lane. And so it kind of explains where we are today. If council wants to change the policy, we're certainly able to comply with the council direction to do that. It's just there will be some consequences once we get past the current backlog and then get back into the, pay per alley system, if you will. And I guess the last point I'll raise is that one of the issues, because I believe we had this conversation, discussion with the council of the day, the pay per alley situation works well when everyone agrees to do that on the block. It doesn't work so well when either folks at the end, folks in the middle, buy their portion of the alley, and then we have no way of accessing that alley to deal with weeds and trees and anything else that might be back there. And so those are some of the challenges that we will have in that process, is that as those alleys become closed off, they'll become landlocked, and then the neighbor will call, or someone along the block will call the municipality and say, there's weeds on your property behind my house, I would like you to take care of them. And we have a very difficult time in doing that in terms of accessing those properties. So there was a bunch of non-financial qualitative factors that went into the policy development and eventually the policy acceptance and approval. We can go the other way, but there will be some challenges that come from that.
Joe, I know all that, and 9 out of 10 times when somebody comes to buy an alley from us, when the person took the alley without permission and didn't buy it, it's through real estate. They've assumed the alley. They can't close because the fence is on municipal property. Then they come in, they buy the alley. But you can't if we're going to let everybody do this forever, we're really cheating the honest people who have bought alleys for the last 100 years here. I have a cumbersome on my property. It's an easement. I can't have anything in there in 15 feet. There is nothing there in 15 feet. But we can't, knowing that people are breaking the law, knowing that we have a liability, just ignore it. That's the issue here. As well as, why would I buy an alley? You're not going to do anything to me anyways. And you only changed this in the last term because the policy was never this way before. So I've made a motion. If somebody seconds, it's fine. If nobody seconds it, there is no vote. The motion's dead, and I've said my piece. Thank you.
Mr. Burns, if you could make your motion again, but maybe could clarify, you did mention something about 60 days, which we were unsure of what you meant by that. So if you could make the motion again, and then we'll go from there.
Okay, to clarify that, because there's so many and it's going to take 16 years to do it, I don't want that. I don't care if they're in the queue. So to me, it's 60, 90, or as long as we get, they're going to buy the alley and there's a commitment, that's it. You guys, I'm not the legal, I don't have to deal with it. So maybe you can tell me but I'm not prepared to wait 6 years and spend $420,000 over the 6 years to subsidize this.
But just to clarify, the reason they're in the queue for that long is because our budget doesn't allow us to do that each year. They've expressed interest in purchasing these, but we're the ones who are delaying it. So I think that's, I don't know how we could put that 60 days in with, it's our.
I guess the motion is dead because no one's going to second it.
Well, no, we'll second it. We want to make sure we have clarification on what you're asking for before anyone tries to second it. Mr. Duvall, do you want to add something to that?
I was, but I'm not sure if I'm supposed to wait until there's open for discussion or if I'm just supposed to be quiet and wait my turn.
we still need clarification on what you want for 60 days. Just, yeah, if you can turn on your mic just to clarify just what you're asking for, so then we can decide if it's seconded or not.
Well, now you're telling me you don't have the money, so 60 days is really an invalid time to put in there. So if I tell you 60 days, it's automatically defeated because you can't do it. So I guess what I would need is maybe I would make a motion to defer and have administration come back and give us the timelines before we vote on this. And to clarify a motion, if it's second to defer, there's no future discussion.
Madam Mayor, can I ask a question of the mover? Just to clarify, so you're asking administration to come back and give you a timeline in which we will be able to deal with the properties, the alley closings that are in the queue?
No. Give me a timeline. I mean, they're in the queue, but I don't want the queue to continue. So I can say 60 days, 90 days. I don't know how much notice you have to give people to say that the policy is changing.
If I understand
And
you,
then if we go to full recovery, I mean, they're going to have to pay full recovery.
so what you're asking, if I can just clarify, what you're asking for is a change in the policy, and those in the queue will now be subject to the new policy after a certain amount of time, whatever grace period you might want to give.
Yes.
Just give us 1 second here. Councillor Burns, are you making a motion to defer at this time or to suspend the policy? What is the motion that you're putting forward?
I would make a motion then for administration to come back with a time frame that we can advise anyone in the queue that we're going to full recovery and no motion to defer. That way there'd be a subsequent report.
So with that motion, just to clarify, if we go to the public, let them know in 60 days, this policy will be gone, it will be full cost recovery, are you still interested in purchasing that alley at the full cost recovery? That's what you're looking for?
Right. I said the time frame would not necessarily be 60 days. It's up to administration to determine a fair time frame. Whether it's 60 days or 6 months, that's up to them. I don't know if you can do that, and if not, then I'll leave it at 60 days. But I mean, if you've got 3 that are going to close this year, as an example, then I wouldn't want to disadvantage those people because they've been in good faith. I'm not sure about the other ones that are going to take us 6 years because we don't have the money.
Okay, so before we continue discussing, does anyone want to second the motion? No? Okay. Okay, so did you want to add anything? Mr. Jill, did you want to add anything? Okay, so I think we're at a moment where we're unsure of how to move forward with this current policy. I understand what Mr. Burns is looking for, but I think the confusion surrounds those 35 applications that are in the queue, whether or not they get it at the 350 or are they going to have to pay that full price. I think that's what we're trying to determine at this point, because 35 is a lot, and like you said, 35 applications on our current budget is 6 years in the future before we're done this current policy and can move on to the next, if I'm correct.
Yes, so my only fear, I guess, is those 35 applications were taken on the strength of the fact that it would cost them $350 to get the alley, right? If we're no longer offering that as an opportunity, then it may change whether or not they want to participate.
Which I think is where Mr. Burns was going with his timeline, was saying we would go back, let them know our policy has changed. Please declare within 60 days if you still wish to purchase that property, but it will be at the new price. I believe that's what Mr. Burns was trying to put forward. Okay.
And then just to piggyback on that, one of the difficulties I see is, yes, we have those 35 individuals, each with their own alley, that they're saying, I'll commit to the 350, great. If there's 10 other residents per alley, we're now saying that's 350 letters where we have to kind of get feedback on, and we don't know who's going to get what yet. If they've gone over the halfway point, we're saying 350 today, but when it comes time, oh, it's 350 plus 4,000, and also the other guy, you're not getting anything, which is what happens in some of these instances. So it complicates trying to put this kind of a deadline under that proposal, as from what I can tell, just having gone through it, 23 alleys now.
Councilor Riccio Spagnuolo.
Thank you, through you. I think that would make more work too for your departments to issue all these letters. And I think the 35 applicants that are already in the queue were given the price at that point, and I don't think it's right for us to go back on that. So I would support option 1 and maintain current alley program.
Do you want to add anything?
Perhaps just as a bit of help for administration. I think that from our perspective, from council, we're looking at, number one, do you want to continue with the current alley program, or do you want to move to the full cost recovery program? So that would be decision number one. Number two would be, if it is continue with the current program, then we continue with the new current program. If we move to the full cost recovery of alley sales, then the decision then is going to have to be, do you want it to apply to people within the queue or outside, or not? That would be the second point of decision. So we would indicate to those that are in the queue. I would assume that any policy change, if council chooses to go in that direction, would not apply to anyone that has, a survey already done and we're on the final legs of getting that finalized. But any new activities happening on a request to close, those would be at the new policy, should council want to go with a new policy. If council goes with the existing policy, there's no change. We're just reaffirming the policy. If we're going to go to the new policy, we just need to know, do we want the folks in the queue to be under the old policy or the new policy?
Okay, hopefully that clarified everything was discussed. So if I can get, if you want to discuss further, we can, or a motion, Councilor Reno.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I would like to make a motion that we continue with the current policy, and that at budgets we look at possibly increasing the amount slightly. Could you please tell me the amount that we're currently spending on it?
The annual budget right now is $68,000.
68,000. I'd like to see a 10% increase to try to cover and to try to get these alleys closed faster. The intention of this whole program was to get these alleys off our plate and not have the parade of people coming in here that one side wants it, one side doesn't want it, and there's just been way too many heartaches over the last 8 years that I've seen. So my motion is to keep the current policy and to have administration review the budget at budget time. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a seconder. we can discuss if needed. Any other further discussion on the motion that was put forward? I myself agree we can't change the policy, unfortunately, because we seem like we're more or less trapped with 35 applications in the queue. However, I don't want to increase the budget, personally. I think that we put a lot of money into this program already, and I don't think it's right that our residents continue to pay for it. I would rather us continue with the 35 people in the queue, get it done, and after that, I think we should do full cost recovery, because we've just heard it's just going to continue to cost us more money every single year. How much are we willing to keep putting forward to cover other people's costs to purchase alleys that they're using when they should not be? So that's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else has any discussion on it. Otherwise, I will call vote. Okay, all in favor of the motion that was put forward? Opposed? Okay, so that one's lost.
I think the easiest motion would be, we recognize everyone in the queue stays at what we promised them at the current rate. All future applications coming in become full cost recovery. And I would make that motion.
Okay. And a support. Any other discussion on that motion? Okay. All in favor of Mr. Burns' motion?
Through you. I do agree with that. I do believe that the 35 people that are in the queue should be honored what they were told, 100%. Do I think that a little bit more money should go in the budget? I kind of agree with Councillor Reno, but at the same time, I also don't want extra cost for the town also. So you know what, I will go with this vote and vote for what Mr. Burns mentioned.
Okay, so all in favor of the motion Mr. Burns put forward? Opposed? Mr. Reno? That carries. Thank you. I'm sorry that was so long, but we got through it. We'll allow Deputy Mayor to come back in, and we'll move on to item 3, which is the alternate parking policy approval. And then, yeah. Mr. Beggs.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. The report tonight is the final step in our alternating parking program. Previously adopted through a report was that with new developments and new roads that are going in, that we would install alternating parking as developments were built. And this report and policy covers the remainder of the town, and it's a way to formalize the requests that come in. So basically, we've simplified this part so that a formal request must come in from a resident that they would like the alternating parking in their area. And the only two stipulations that we have is that it must be a local road and it must have curb and gutter on that road. If those criteria are met, administration would approve the alternating parking, bylaws would be updated, and the signage would be installed. And we would slowly work through installing the alternating parking throughout the town. We're looking at doing probably between 5 and 6 per year, so it would be a slow process, but it would come in as people request it, and hopefully we don't have too many reports coming to council where people are asking for it and we're discussing it. That would be done at the administrative level. If you have any questions, I'm available for questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reno.
I'm not sure if you have this number or not, Mark, and please let me apologize for putting you on the spot. I remember probably 5 of these coming in front of council. How many have we seen in the last 4 years, 8 years, 10 years? I want to think it's probably an average of one a year that's been paraded in here. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's a small number. It's an issue that comes up where some spots it goes in and there's nothing, no issues at all. Other times it goes in and there's lots of issues.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. I mean, we really don't get many of these, and I do believe that the few that we have gotten have had voices that have opposed. And this new policy, the way I read it, there is no opportunity to oppose. One person wants it, and the whole street gets it. And I really don't. I can't support that. So that's. I'll further discussion, but I'll be prepared to make a motion when it comes.
Thank you, Councillor Reno. Anyone else have any questions or comments on the parking policy? I agree with Councillor Reno. That was my biggest concern when I saw this, was you have one neighbor who just is upset that, you know, their neighbors each have, you know, 3 or 4 cars and are parking on the road, and I understand it can cause issues and we worry about safety, but I think there needs to be a different process to have these, to allow the other residents to have their say. And I feel like this doesn't allow it. They just, one person comes in, I don't want it, we go, okay, check, you're this, this, and this, you get it. And I feel like that's not fair, and I want to make sure that all the residents get a chance to have their say in this. One other thing I had a discussion with earlier was the curb and gutter. So cul-de-sacs are currently something we're trying to sign with no parking. And the problem I see with that is, in this scenario, if we're starting to do no parking in cul-de-sacs, we've now pushed all those vehicles down the road. And if we also implement alternate parking on that road, we've created a bigger issue, and we are going to hear from residents very upset that we're not allowing anyone to park really anywhere. And, you know, I realize most people should be parking in their garage and in their driveway. However, we all have, you know, gatherings and events, and we don't want to be ticketing people who visit families in our town. So I think we need to tweak this policy just a little bit to allow for residents to have their say. And I know we were trying to stop more of this from coming to these meetings, but I feel like we've taken that right completely away from them, and I don't want to do that. I don't know if you have a comment or suggestion on that?
Just I guess a comment about the cul-de-sacs. So the bylaw for the cul-de-sacs is and has been in place already for a number of years. So this is in addition to the cul-de-sacs. You already can't park in any cul-de-sac in town. We don't have most of them signed. So in a new subdivision, when it's built, it would be signed, and there is no parking in cul-de-sacs. And that is for maintenance operations, garbage trucks, fire trucks, and being able to get in and get out. In general, the Public Works Department wants this to happen on every street. It helps in the wintertime for snow removal. It helps with daily operations. We get complaints all the time that there's cars parked on both sides of the road and I can't get down my road. I can't see where to back out of my driveway. We've looked at a number of things where, you know, almost every house in LaSalle has a driveway, and that's what it's for. It's for parking. And, you know, if you live in a bigger city, parking on the street is very challenging. And we're not a huge city, but we are getting bigger and bigger, and we need to have ways that we can get down the roads, and emergency vehicles can get down the roads. So we looked at different ways of having residents do surveys, you know, a vote, and have a say, which we thought would be exactly what you're saying. It would be great to have that say, but at the end of the day, we want the alternating parking on every street. So the thought was, why, if someone is requesting it, which is just the mechanism to get the ball rolling, we do want this to happen. And we are going to, every single time that one comes in, and that we've done over the last year since I've been here, if anybody requests it, administration's recommendation is that we do proceed with it, and 9 times out of 10, it's approved. So along those same lines, rather than having the work of a survey and getting people to say yes and no, and so many people don't even respond, we want it. So we thought this made sense to keep it fairly simple and just go ahead and do it. The initial process that we looked at with this was to initiate alternating parking all through town and just spend all the money in one big lump and put it everywhere. But we thought that was going to be a little bit too heavy-handed and too expensive as well, and we would have a council full of residents opposing that. So yes, there are ways that we could do surveys or some sort of engagement, which may or may not really work, but it would be something, and we could do that. However, at the end of the day, the recommendation from administration, 9 times out of 10 is going to be to proceed with it. So, and that was the spirit that we went through in developing the policy, just to kind of skip a few steps and get on to where we wanted to land. And I can appreciate that, like where you're coming from. And if we do want to go that way, we can do that. We can do some kind of a survey similar to what we do with traffic calming. It's just another step in the process.
Thank you, I appreciate that. I don't know if council has any other questions or comments on that. I think we know why you guys want it. I don't think that's the issue. We fully understand. I mean, you have days, I drive down the street next to me and people do park right next to each other and you think to yourself, you couldn't have pulled up just a little bit so that we could kind of get through that traffic. And I know fire trucks and all our emergency vehicles need access down our streets, but at the same time, I don't compare LaSalle to other areas or other cities because I think we're pretty unique in our features that we have here. And as much as, yes, we have driveways and we have garages, we also have families who seem to have multiple vehicles, more so than you would see in larger cities, I guess. So I think that's where we're getting our residents calling us, complaining, upset about what we've put in place. And I do apologize. I don't mean cul-de-sac was a new policy. It's just we're now signing more than we did before, and we're getting the calls already. I think we've had 2 in the past month and a half of phone calls with new signage just because we've done construction on the road or whatever. So I'm going to leave it to council. I don't know if you have a preference, if you have the recommendation that's put in front of us this evening. If you're happy with the policy the way it is, by all means, put the motion forward. If not, feel free to propose something else. Go Councillor Beatrice-Vigneault, then Councillor Reno right after.
I just have a comment. Thank you through you. I do believe that we should give the residents a little bit of a say as well. So whether surveys or not, maybe public consultation might be more cost-effective and more less time for all the paperwork and trails. And then you just give them a deadline on this is the date that we're having it. You're invited to have a say. And if they choose not to come, then we take it upon ourselves to do as you please. But I do think that it's important to have the residents have a say.
Councillor Reno?
I'd like to make a motion that we remain, that our policy remains the same. If someone requests an alley closing, that it comes before council.
You said alley closing. Just want to make sure we have the...
I'm sorry, I meant alternating parking, that it continues to come before council.
Okay, so we have the motion. Do we have support for that motion?
I will support it, but can I also do a friendly amendment, I guess, and just maybe add that we reach out to residents for public consultation regarding that? I don't know if that's the right time to add that or not.
That's fine.
Okay, so we have a mover and we have support, and Mr. Militia.
Just a question. I just want to be clear, like, is the council meeting meant to be the public consultation? Like, are you asking for us to inform folks, like when we get the application coming in, requesting alternating parking, you would like that to come to council for a decision as opposed to being a policy-based decision? So we understand that part, but the consultation side of it, is that meant to come to, is that the council meeting, or is there something separate from that?
Mr. Mara?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, That process was the previous process. That was subject of the report that's an attachment to this current report. Council's direction of that day was they did not want to have this discussion at a council meeting. They wanted to find a process and a policy to put in place to eliminate that process. So certainly that's what came forward today for council's consideration, was to take a look at dealing with alternating parking in a way that would expedite the process, I would say, and make it a little bit more convenient to implement. So certainly if council wishes to go back to the process, the way it used to work was a request would come in, a report would be prepared. All the people on that street that's going to be affected by alternating parking will receive notification of when the report's going to council, and then they come and speak at the council meeting. And there's information provided from emergency services through public works of why implementing alternating parking on that particular street is required due to access issues, emergency services issues, or things of that nature. And then it's council's decision from there.
Thank you.
Thank you, through you. I don't mean that they have to come to council for their discussion. I meant like a public consultation at the event center, the Volmer here, with fire, police, administration, just to go over the pros, the cons, and just have a discussion on if it's something that the whole neighborhood wants, or the whole street wants to explore, or if it's just one person that just wants the one-sided parking.
So just to clarify, you're hoping every time someone comes forward with a request that we'll have an event at the...
No, not, it would just be... Thank you, through you. It would just be a one-time thing. You would offer it to the residents to come for an open consultation, for them to get a say. And then if, like you had mentioned, Mr. Beggs, that this is something that you want to do for all the streets of LaSalle, that it's like a 1-2 time thing that we would do throughout the year. That's what I'm thinking. Just to allow residents to have a say as well. If it's too complicated, then so be it.
Councillor Reno.
Okay, I'm just going to suggest, based on what Peter's asking for and what you're asking for, that we continue the policy where all residents are notified of the public meeting, which we have on Tuesday nights. They have a chance to come in, they have a chance to voice their opinion, and we have a choice to make a decision that night. So everybody is on that page. I do think that's very important that everybody knows what's going on in their neighborhood and they have a chance to speak. So I would agree with that, but I think that is just basically the policy that we had. So I just want to turn down the new policy and continue with the old policy.
Okay. So we have Councillor Reno has moved it. Councillor Ricci-Spigno has supported that we do not move forward with today's recommendation, instead go back to the policy we had previously. Did you want to add something?
Just one clarification question. On a new development that gets built, nobody's living there, what would the idea be with putting alternating parking signs up in a new development, which in the previous report to council, my understanding would be that was approved, that we would carry on doing that?
I think we would go back to what that previous one had. So that would say any new subdivisions would then start with alternating parking. Therefore, they would be all well aware before building, and there wouldn't be any neighbor disruptions. Councillor Reno.
Question to Ms. Beggs, would that be controlled in site plan? When they come to put in a subdivision, could we not tell them at that point that it's alternating parking? Is that something that gets taken care of at that point?
So thank you for the question. Site plans are typically for condominium developments, but plans of subdivision, certainly we can incorporate some of that language into the subdivision agreement with the corporation.
Thank you.
Okay. So just to clarify for everyone again, we will not be moving the recommendation put forward tonight. We will stay with the previous policy where requests would come before council, residents could come and have their say, and any new developments would start automatically with the alternating parking. That is the motion put forward. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 4, fleet purchase replacement of roads department bucket truck. Mr. Beggs, why not?
This one might be a little more straightforward, but maybe not. We'll see. Mayor and members of council, we currently have a 2001 bucket truck that has not been approved for replacement in 2023. We were planning on putting it in the budget in 2024, but we have recently got into some larger repairs with the unit. And as we know, with delivery times, we're looking at about a year to get the truck. So what the report tonight is asking for is a pre-approval of the purchase for the bucket truck, so that I can put the order in right away. The truck itself will not be here probably until August of 2024, and we wouldn't pay any dollars until we get delivery. So essentially, it's a pre-approval for a 2024 budget purchase. Excuse me. I'm available for any questions.
Thank you.
Move the
Councillor-
recommendation to purchase.
Okay, Councillor Regis Bagnell.
Thank you. Just a question. For the 290,000, obviously that would be locked in for next year's price, because if we waited, the prices could obviously inflate, go up. The other question is the older truck, the 2001 truck, is it salvageable to recoup to sell it, or sell the parts or anything, just to make a little bit of profit from it?
Yeah, those are great questions. The purchase is locked in. As with all the purchases that we make recently, they are subject to some changes, higher taxes, and all these other things that we deal with now. So it likely will go up slightly, but generally locked in. And the good news is, with selling used vehicles right now, we actually have done very well with some used items, and I'm always surprised how much we do get. So we sell them on our Gov Deals auction, which is available to anyone, and that has worked pretty well for the last couple of years.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Councillor Desjardins?
Thank you, through you. So it's safe to use right now then? We're good for a little while?
Yes, we've patched it together and had some things done on it as much as we can to keep it going. And
Okay.
So we're going to get another year out of it.
Thank you. Then I would go ahead and accept the motion. Put the motion forward.
You're supporting the motion? Okay, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. Item 5, fourth concession drain tender results. Mr. Cavucci.
Thank you. Mayor, members, and council. The report in front of you is to award the fourth concession contract to JCS Construction for $663,170. The fourth concession tender closed on July 18th and is under budget. And the contractor we are familiar with working with, so we recommend giving them the contract to do the drainage work. This fourth concession drain work is to improve the drain overall, consists of ditching, clearing, bank stabilization, some culvert work, and is a joint project with the town of Tecumseh. And they've been made aware of the contract, and they are also in favor of awarding it to JCS. The fourth concession drain project started in 2018. The final reading and passing of the bylaw for the drain was on April 25th. And so we're at the last stages of the drainage project, and we recommend signing a contract with JCS and starting the work, which is planning within a 2-week period to start and should be done before the end of the year. And I'll answer any questions if you have them.
Thank you very much. Members of council, any questions or comments? Councillor Burns.
If it came in under budget, then each taxpayer amount would go down. Probably not a huge amount, but there would be a reduction.
Yeah, so the reduction would probably be about 10%.
Thank you very much for that. I'd make a motion to accept the recommendation and move forward.
Moved by Councillor Burns, support by Deputy Mayor. Did you have a question or anything to follow? No. My only question, I know you mentioned the town of Tecumseh was in favor of it. What about the County of Essex? Do we have to consult with them?
No, this was, there's properties in Tecumseh that drain into the drain. That's why Tecumseh was involved, but the county is now part of this project.
Okay, I'm just reading the financial implications, and it says this would include collection from the town of Tecumseh, County of Essex, and LaSalle property. Am I reading the wrong thing? Just maybe a typo?
I think it's a typo. I'm glad you read these things.
Okay, so County of Essex is not part of that discussion, it's just town of Tecumseh, LaSalle property owners as well. Okay, thank you very much for clarification. We do have a mover and seconder. All in favor? And that carries. Item 6, declaration of municipal significance for Hickey Country Music event. I will hand it over to you. It's not the name on my sheet.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we're excited to host at the Event Center at LaSalle Landing the Hickey Country Music event on October 28th. This is a private event run by Hickey Country Music, and in order to declare their event municipally significant for the AGCO, they do require a declaration from council. So that's to move forward with their special occasion permit to serve alcohol to the public. I'm available for any questions about the event. Thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor, then Councillor Reno.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. So just to make sure I understand, special occasion permit, our liquor license, they'll be completely compliant with all of our rules, all of our liquor requirements, adhere to our security requirements, and be reviewed by fire and police to make sure that everything is above board. Is that correct, sir?
That's correct. So they do have to adhere to our municipal alcohol risk management policy in addition to any AGCO guidelines, and all of those items in their event health and safety plan are reviewed by the special event review team, which also includes members from LaSalle Police and LaSalle Fire.
Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Councillor Reno.
Thank you. Am I to understand that this is going to be necessary of anyone that rents the event center that wants to sell alcohol?
Not necessarily. So this is only required for public events, meaning that anyone from the public can attend. Any private event that contains alcohol still requires a special occasion permit, but doesn't necessarily need the municipality to declare it municipally significant. So as per the AGCO guidelines, a private event would be invited guests. And the difference with this one is that it is open to the public to purchase tickets.
Okay, and a follow-up question. Can this only be declared by council? Is this something that in the future can be taken care of by administration, or do we have to, is it part of the rules that we have to declare it every time?
I'll have our clerk respond. Thanks.
This is something that when we look at the delegation of authority bylaw can be delegated out to administration to approve.
Okay, sounds good. I'd make the motion that we do consider this a significant event, and I would like us to look at coming back with I'm just trying to figure out how to say this, sorry. We've been doing a lot of this tonight. I would like to look at, considering that we are going to start doing this more and more often in the future, that this is something that administration can be delegated.
Okay. And support by Councillor Burns. Any other? No? All right. With that, I'll just call the question. All in favor? And that carries. Item I is our consent agenda. There's 3 items on the consent agenda. Do you want to speak to any of those 3 items? If not, we can approve them all together. Councillor Desjardins?
Thank you, through you. The second note here on the consent agenda addresses violence against women. And I want to request, we have had a letter of intimate partner violence. It's been sent to us and to many other communities. And I believe that as a proactive community, we need to respond in a positive manner, that we support the actions required. I have had a conversation with the police chief, and right now this is not an issue in our community, and I certainly hope it doesn't ever become that way, but I think we do need to be proactive and support it. It's important that we support the victims. It's important that we support their families, and that we make any effort to reduce the numbers of this incident in our region. So I'm asking that administration provide a letter of support to the group from our municipality.
Deputy Mayor?
I'll second that, and I'll speak from my past. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. As a former police officer, I can tell you that these issues take place in every community. We might not see them in ours, but let us not be naive to assume it doesn't happen. So to Councillor Desjardins' point, I believe a strong repudiation of violence, intimate partner violence and violence against women is important. And I also believe for the healthy, vibrant community that we have, we need to take a stand and forward what Councillor Desjardins has asked for with the appropriate signatures to make sure that folks understand that in this community, this is unacceptable. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, any other questions or comments? With what you're asking at this point, you're just asking us to show support to the group. Are we looking to do anything further with that?
Sorry. This comes from a group, Violence Against Women Coordinating Committee through Windsor Essex, and I would like a letter sent to them saying that we're supporting it and do what we can to assist them.
Is that okay? Councillor Desjardins, are we declaring an epidemic?
That's a tough one. In our own municipality, no, but overall in the Windsor Essex County, it is epidemic, so yes.
Okay. So we will be declaring an epidemic. We will be showing them our support. And do we want to show that support to other communities? Are we asking them to support it as well, or are we just going to simply do the support to the organization?
I think we need to support the organization, and I believe that we have a letter that indicates who our letter of support is going to. So I'd like to follow that letter and get it out to as many people as possible, because it is something, as my colleague says, that unfortunately this is something that happens behind closed doors. We don't always know about it. And I think we just need to make sure that our community especially knows that we will support whatever we can. We will help them, we will help their families. And if we just use the letter of authorization that came with the package and send it out to the municipalities and the organizations involved.
Thank you very much. So we have that motion. Is it a motion complete to you? Yeah. That's okay? Okay. And we have the support. All in favor? Okay. So that was item 2 of the consent agenda. We still have items 1 and items 3 if there's nothing further to discuss. Oh, Councillor Reno.
Just in regards to reports to council, I was just wondering if there's any update from the clerk's office concerning the Airbnb regulations. We're looking, I know it's not due until November. I'm just wondering if there's any types of updates. And the reason I ask is that I've recently come across an ad on Facebook offering a LaSalle home to be a party home every weekend for a certain price. And I could imagine if that was next to my house, that would upset me. So I was just wondering if we've had any types of updates on what you may be looking into with the Airbnb regulation, which is listed under here as coming back in November.
Okay, so just to clarify, it won't be clerks, it's the planning department. She's trying to throw it back, but it's not happening. I know there has been discussion, and I know the town of Amherstburg has recently implemented a bylaw that we've been looking into. I don't know if you want to add anything onto that at this time.
So I don't unfortunately have a more comprehensive update at this time, but we are, motivated to get that report to council in November. We've been doing some research to try and pull all the information together. We are sitting down with representatives from Amherstburg to understand and unpack sort of their process and how they went about adopting and licensing. We've had some discussions with the town of Essex as well. So we're starting to put together all the pieces of the information. We've done a preliminary inventory of what we believe to be some of the short-term rentals in the town of LaSalle. So we're slowly starting to put those pieces together, and it's our hope that we're going to come before council in November with a more comprehensive update.
Okay, thank you. I'm just glad that you guys are continually on it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other discussions on item 1 and 3? If not, we can get a motion to receive those. Councillor Reno, Councillor Desjardins, all in favor, and that carries. J1, County of Essex County Council highlights from the July 19th meeting. Any questions or comments on that? If not, just a motion to receive. Councillor Regis-Spagnolo and support Councillor Burns. Any comments? Councillor Reno.
Thank you. This is in regards to the Essex report. I just had a question regarding a statement on here. It says, council to consider bylaw for county to take responsibility for waste collection. Essex County Council could decide as early as August whether to take over responsibility for waste collection from municipalities. Council received an update on the process in a report by the county solicitor and the proposed bylaw required to make the change. The bylaw is expected to be on the county council agenda for August 16th. Now, in our last meeting, we talked about having them come back to us with costing and things like that. I don't see any of that in here. I see their next meeting coming up in a week where they could decide to take it over. I'm just wondering if anyone has an update on that language.
So just to clarify, the July 19th meeting was before they came to see us. I believe they came at the end of the month. So they've actually visited us since these meeting minutes were taken, because that was the meeting before. However, and I think, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe at our meeting, we did direct them to come with costing, but that was to come to the county council meeting next week, where they are to present us with the full report. And at that time, county council will vote in favor or against adopting the garbage collection at the county level. So it won't actually come back to each community to vote on separately. We did that by approving it at the last meeting and sending it back to county council. And county council is going to receive the full report and then determine if they approve it or not. With that being said, we have our concerns in the town of LaSalle regarding the financing part of it, more so than the collection. I mean, there's some concern with the collection and the current services that are offered in the town of LaSalle. Our biggest objection to it was how the funds would be collected, and that we were opposed to the collection of funds based on assessment base, because it became unfair to the residents of our town. So Deputy Mayor and myself will be paying close attention to that next week when that report comes to County Council to be voted on, because we have asked that that is part of that presentation. But at this time, I have nothing further to tell you with what it looks like.
So just for clarification, in the last meeting, we voted to move completely to their service. Is that, did I misunderstand that?
No, so there was the presentation with oh, I'm forgetting the lawyer's name at this moment. That is awful. Mr. Sundin. Mr. Sundin presented the, I don't even know what it's called now, the 369, I don't even know what it was, where it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. If we go to the county council and all 14 members are there to vote, even if the two of us object to it, the town of LaSalle doesn't have a choice. They have to move to a county collection.
And that's how we voted in our motion last week?
We'll read the motion.
So the motion of that evening was that council receives the presentation on regional waste management, that council acknowledges its intent to proceed with regional waste collection with the County of Essex, and that council prefers a per capita basis funding model for the regional waste collection initiative, recognizing the possibility of a hybrid funding model.
So with that, nothing comes back to us?
Nothing will come back to us here.
I do believe that a bylaw needs to be passed at the local level.
So under the triple majority rules, I believe it's county council has to pass it by majority. The majority of the local municipalities have to pass a bylaw. And I believe the population of the local municipalities must be greater than 50% or something like that. So there's the triple majority rule. So we will get the bylaw back to pass or not pass locally. But regardless of that, the way the legislation is set up, we could be forced to have our garbage collection collected by this other entity, regardless of whether we pass it locally or not. That's a legislative framework that's set up in a two-tier government system.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that.
Any other questions or clarification on that item? Obviously, it's an important one to us. We did request that they come to see us at that last meeting so that we could fully understand that. We acknowledge that regional collection is better on the whole. However, financially, it needs to be fair to all 7 municipalities, and the current way that they're proposing, it's not. So hopefully when it comes to the meeting next week, please tune in and watch, as you'll see what is being presented to us. And at that point, the 2 of us will be at that table voting, and then from there, the bylaw will come back to here. It won't be a presentation, it's just a bylaw, if I'm correct, right? Just the bylaw, so, okay. Any other conversation on those minutes? If not, if I can just get a motion to receive them. Oh, I have to call a question, sorry. All in favor? I think he was just moving it again. I already had that. Okay. Any questions and statements by council members? No? Notices of motion. Okay. This is the closed session reporting. So earlier this evening, council met in closed session to discuss a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality in a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to negotiations being a matter regarding a land lease proposal. Council received information and provided direction to administration. Okay. Do you need anything on that? Okay. And next is bylaws. So there are 3 bylaws. We are asking a first, second, third reading and finally passed for bylaw 8812, a bylaw to confirm the donations of lots 507 to 514 registered plan 718 from Joseph Sismar. 8813, a bylaw to amend the Silverleaf subdivision developers subdivision agreement. And 8814, a bylaw to authorize the execution of an agreement between JCS Construction Incorporated and the Corporation of the Town of LaSalle for the 4th concession drain improvements. Councillor Desjardins, support. Councillor Reno, all in favor, and that carries. And at this time, we'll just move right to the confirmatory bylaw. That confirmatory bylaw 8815 be given a first, second, and third reading and finally passed. Councillor Burns, Councillor Richo Spagnolo, all in favor. That carries. There's a schedule of meetings listed. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.